Hey guys, time for your most favorite part of lectures here on the channel. It's called Step by Step, and I know you've been waiting for so long for this one. It's King's Indian defense. I decided to split in two videos. One is going to be about sidelines, and another one is going to be about the main lines. Main lines begin after d4, c4, knight c3, e4 for white, and that's going to be a subject of the next step-by-step video. In this one, I'm going to try to explain you how should you play the King's Indian against all those side, annoying, not known, and simply kind of a bothering system by white players. Let's immediately get to the point, and hopefully you're gonna enjoy this King's Indian experience. Let's go. So we just have to go with d4. But before we go to d4 and before we talk about the King's Indian defense, I always insist on one very important and big thing about the King's Indian. It's one of the most universal systems against any opening, except e4. What do I mean by that? You absolutely can play the King's Indian against all moves except the e4 first move by white. So what does it mean? What are the options for white players? Let's imagine they go with b3. They go for the Nimzo-Larsen position and you don't want to know what to do. Well, guys, you play knight f6 and you go g6. And you kind of play the King's Indian system. More about the King's Indian systems and more about these type of positions, you can actually check from this video and the next video, and to realize what kind of plans would you like to go afterwards. But for sure, for you who actually play the King's Indian, these guys can play e3, can play g3, can, of course, with the knight f3, but you always go bishop g7, short castle, d6, and ideally, you would like to push your pawn to e5. Then another thing is if they play English opening. You don't know what to do. Well, this lecture is just going to give you an answer. If you're a King's Indian player, you can go knight f6, and when they go knight c3, you go g6. Now they can go into the g3 system, which is covered in one of the videos here on the channel. I believe it's called King's Indian attack or King's Indian defense against the English opening. It's with the code 826 for black players. Then, apart from this one, if they go with e4, it would just transpose into a line that is going to be the subject of the next lesson. But before we actually go and touch the base of these main lines of the next video, I just want to show you that they don't necessarily have to play after they play e4 because they threaten to push e5. They necessarily don't have to play d4 here and go into the main lines. And once again, it is going to be the subject of the next step-by-step main lines. So what do we do here after d6? And they all of a sudden, out of nowhere, go with g3. Now you're wondering, what is this? Well, guys, I'm just going to remind you, if you're a Sicilian players, and if they go with e4, and you go c5, and they go c4, we kind of have like English opening against the Sicilian, and here you're just using against Botvinnik system, you're using Botvinnik plan. What's that? You play knight c6, knight c3, g6, g3, bishop g7, bishop g2, and it probably reminds you of copycat system. So after knight f6, knight g on e2, castles, castles, you just go back with the knight on e8. It's the key moment of these positions which opens up the bishop, which takes full control of the d4, and you're just repositioning your knight via c7 to e6. This is all you have to remember, and it's one very big curiosity. This system with the white pieces, it's called Botvinnik system, and you don't need to be so special and to know anything that's special to play it with white pieces. But from another point of view, the plan with the 98, it's also called Botvinnik plan, because Botvinnik knew what was the most annoying type of creating the system with the black pieces. And the point is, when they play d3, knight c7, and when they simply go with the most classic bishop e3, you can go knight d4, you can go d6. I like to jump with the knight on d4, and when they play rook b1, I always like to avoid b4 with a5. No matter what I do, I'm just going to play d6 and knight e6 afterwards. There is one more golden rule about these positions. For example, if in this case they play queen d2, you just go d6, and the golden thing, as soon as they play rook b1, you stop that Botvinnik system with a5. That's very important rule. Any a3, you just play a4, and they can't play and they can't push any more b4. While in the case of any bishop h6, this is a very important positional approach. They want to exchange the dark square bishops, and then you're probably wondering, why on earth do you need your bishop there on g7? You don't need it anymore. It doesn't have to be open. So a golden position rule I actually read in one of those Dvoretsky's books, then you play e5. And now when they take on g7, you're just a cool guy who actually has a very cool position, and any f4, you're just defending with a very nice defensive approach with f6. Any f takes e5, of course, you should recapture by d pawn, while in any other case, you just want to go with the bishop on e6 and go there, and knight on c7 also can keep an eye on the d5, but I like to actually in a block position give up my bishop for the knight and play better knight than the bishop. That's all you have to understand about these positions. Anytime they take, you always take by c pawns. Anytime they play knight d5, you just take. And when they play like this, you play bishop d7 with normal equalish type of the game. Well, in the case of something like knight e2, you have a very lovely plan, bishop d7, breaking with b5, that's one thing, or repositioning your knight via a6 to c5 and controlling the queen side, just like that. But sooner or later, you'll just have to break at some point with b5. Another thing, so two golden rules about this one. Don't let them go with b4. And so any rook b1, you go a5. And any bishop h6, because you're about to lose your control of the diagonal h8, a1. And in that case, you just go with a very mighty e5 move. And what's so special about this one? There is no more bishop. And on top of all that, now they have problems with the light square bishop, and you're just playing a game like this. Once again, a golden rule, when they take like this, you always recapture by c pawn. Any knight e2, you can now go a5, knight a6, knight c5, you can go bishop d7, b5, rook b8, b5, and another golden rule, any knight d5, you're just going to capture, and after c takes d5, bishop d7, after e takes d5, then control the dark squares, and everything is in full control. Finally, if they ever play f4, you always play f6. Keep in mind, e5 doesn't only, like take control of the center and constitute, like the rule, like if you're about to exchange the dark square bishops with bishop h6, it's not a problem. Then I'm going to play e5. I don't need it anymore. From another point of view, my pawn on e5 is just locking your light square bishop on g2. That's all you have to know about these positions. So we've seen Botvinnik systems. Another system, they go with f4, bird opening first move. You play knight f6, and when they play knight f3, you go g6. It's very interesting that when they go with type of g3, it reminds me of Leningrad system reversed, where you once again can go with system d5. This is not a typical King's Indian type of the game. And then when they play d3, you go c5 followed by knight c6. Or simply, you can go still with the type of the King's Indian system d6. And when they play d3, to go with like c5, but that's not necessary to be done. You can also play e5, I'm going to show you. And after e4, you play kind of close Sicilian. If they play knight c3, you play rook b8 followed by b5. If they play knight c3, you can play bishop g4, swapping off this bishop for the knight, and go with knight d7, rook c8, or rook b8 and b5, b4. And finally, if they play c3, you just go rook b8, b5, and b4. What's this? Nothing else but a close Sicilians. I just mentioned that you don't have to play move c5, transposing to kind of Sicilian defense, and still you're playing and you're in the waters of the King's Indian. You can also go with e5 move. That's kind of a gambit line because they can't take on e5 because you just give check and win the piece. And from another point of view, when they go with e4, and that's what majority of these guys do, you can just go with some sort of like bishop g4 or the main move knight c6. I'm not a big fan of these e5 positions right in this position, but if you ever enter games like this, I'm suggesting to take. And if they take by bishop, you can just go, for example, with bishop g4, swap off this bishop for the knight, and more or less have like a very cool type of the game without much problems. You're just controlling, they just have the bishop pair, you're just controlling the center, and the game is with mutual chances. But what's my point? You can even play the King's Indian against bird opening. Another thing, another rule. They go g3. Okay, you go knight f6, they go bishop g2, and you go g6. There is one difference with this g3 system. Unlike all other previously seen systems, here you gotta be ready to play kind of a Peart's defense with e4. It's not a big problem because we don't want to play Peart's usually, but here we can because they committed themselves with g3 and bishop g2. So if that happens, you don't have to worry. You just play d6, and when they play d4, you're just playing a cool system, bishop g7, they go knight c3, castles, and when they go knight g on e2, I'm always of opinion that you should be going with knight bd7, short castle, and e5. Position like this is when they play h3, so they can pave up the way for the bishop with bishop e3 and avoid knight g4. And my pretty rich experience of these positions say that you can go with b6. That's my favorite move here. I'm not saying that black is anything that's special, but I really enjoy playing these positions because I want a complete development of my light square bishop with b6. If you play bishop e3, I'll go bishop b7, and I have a nice game. As soon as they play d5 and locking up the game, I play a5. I want to jump with my knight on c5. I want to bring my bishop back to c8, and we got a typical King's Indian type of the game. Even though it was, and it began like a Peart's opening, you just want to break with f5. Another thing is when they play b6 and they immediately go with bishop e3 without losing the tension, you go bishop b7, and let's say they go with g4, for example. Another typical idea. Here, you can break this with h5. That's one type of idea. g5, and for example, you go knight h7, going after this, they go h5, and boom, you just break it with f6. Another type of these systems is to simply playing e takes d4, and when they play knight takes d4, you just have very lovely type of the game. You can go, for example, knight c5, and if you go knight c5, I don't see any problems for us in this position. Just watch out not to blunder some e5. As long as the rook is on f1, they don't threaten e5 because you take on g2, it takes f6, you take on you play queen f6, but in this case bishop is on e3. So watch out not to blunder this one, and that's why you play, for example, knight c1, defending on b7 and going after the pawn on e4. Those are some golden rules about these positions. Finally, if they go with the very first move, knight f3, ready opening, well, guys, if they play ready opening, you play knight f6, and that's one of the most classic approaches into the King's Indian from the ready opening and from the English opening, because those are almost one of those, let's call them typical ways of reaching the King's Indian, and one of the most favorite ways of reaching the King's Indian. And now, when I just explained you that you, generally speaking, and that's a big curiosity about King's Indian, you always, against any opening except e4, can play the King's Indian. That's already a big thing. It's compatible with all these: d4 first move, b3, c4, f4, g3, knight f3. That's a big thing, because you don't need to know anything else but just to be familiar with the plans from this lecture and the next one about step by step, and you're absolutely going to be able to be familiar with most of these things. I just want to tell you one more thing. I just showed you the Botvinnik system. If you want to know more about the Botvinnik system, find it here on my channel. You have one of the videos against sidelines of the Sicilians, e4, c5, c4. Why did I brought it up like that? Why did I bring it up with this? Because I'm about to release my Dragon course, and when I release it, you got to be familiar with all these side systems against the Dragon, and that's why I covered all side Sicilians, e4, c5. So find it here on the channel. Let's carry on. Another very important thing is that when they play d4, we always, if we want to play the King's Indian, we got to go with knight f6. And here, I once again have to insist on zillions of different kinds of ideas and moves. Take a look at this one. I don't want to discuss bishop g5. You will find it on the channel. You have 2 videos about Trompowsky and how to deal with it. My vote goes to d5 and goes to when Kasparov had his conversation with Carlsen, when Carlsen was pretty young, but still one of the best players in the world. They both agree that one of the best moves against Trompowsky is Trompowsky is d5. So why? When they take, recapturing like this, and always going with c6, bishop d6, f5, knight d7, and knight f6. I want to insist on one thing here, guys. When we talk about this one, we're actually talking about Trompowsky's system. Very easy plan for black. Take a look at Kasparov's games here. And one more thing. If you want to know more about this one, find the video on the channel, bishop g5, d5. If you want to play bishop g5, knight e4, also find the video on the channel. I gave you some very modern, top-notch approaches with the black pieces. But once again, Trompowsky players alike and pretty much enjoy to play against knight e4. What I cannot say the same for the second move d5, because I used to be a Trompowsky player, played more than 5,000 games online, tournament, rapid, blitz, bullet, and I always somehow enjoyed my positions when knight e4 happened. But I didn't have such a big joy and such a nice time and comfortable game when they went for d5. Another thing is bishop f4. Nowadays, one of the most popular systems against King's Indian is Jobava system. Here, we don't have Jobava system yet, because Jobava is with the third or second move knight c3, but afterwards bishop f4. Here, you still don't know whether he wants to play knight c3 and d4, if you allow that. Whether he wants to play knight f3, h3, e3, which is kind of London system. Or maybe he just wants to play Jobava system with knight c3. Because of that, we just have to go with g6 and take a look at this one. They go knight f3. We have nothing else but a typical London system. h3 castles, e3, d6. I'm going to show you what I intend to show you about these systems. Another thing is if they go with knight c3. A golden rule, not only about this position, but about any knight c3 against any King's Indian approach at any moment. They just want to go with e4. No, we don't want to let them go with e4. No, we don't want to play a paired system. And we definitely have to play on any knight c3. We got to play d5. Once again, if you want to find more about this one, you also can find video on my channel about this stuff. And second move, knight c3. It's Razazine opening. Any knight c3, guys, they threaten e4, so you got to play d5. When you play d5, they have a couple of options. If they go kind of a main Razazine system, you once again can find on the channel bishop g5, knight bd7. And now, if they play bishop f4, you once again can find on the channel playing bishop d7. It's one of the last videos that I've made here. So a whole bunch of transpositions, but most of these things you can just find on my channel. And when somebody asked me, Mile, how come you actually came up with all these different systems? What's the idea? What's the plan? Well, I want to create a unique opening library on my channel. So whatever you need, hey, let's go to that guy Butcher and his channel. He covered that one. Let's go for that one. And you'll always be able to pick up what you want or what you like. After like d4, knight f6, we have one more line. The other day I had a lesson with one of my students and he asked me, Maya, we studied so many different kinds of positions against King's Indian, but you never showed me how should I play against f4. I said, what the hell, what are you talking about? He said, if they play second move f4. Ah, that one. That one is very annoying because they kind of play some sort of reversed Dutch system or Stonewall system against the King's Indian, but it's very, very good for us because we did not commit ourselves with d5. You're probably wondering, what do I mean by this? Let me show you. You play g6, knight f3, bishop g7, e3, castles, and since I did not commit myself with d5, it means that I can fight for the center and for the typical King's Indian break with e5. So we go with d6, and I want to break at some point with e5, not immediately. So when you play castles, boom, knight c6. My next move, no matter what you do, is going to be e5. Unless you play d5, of course, then I'm going to take that pawn. So you play c3, and we just break in the center with e5. After f takes, we play d takes, and that's a very, very strong position. Now take a look at this one. If they go with d takes e5, I won a couple of games with this knight g4, and I found like a whole bunch of games online where black won in a fairly easy fashion because you just managed to break the pawn structure, create weaknesses in the white's camp, and afterwards you're gonna go after these weaknesses. Another thing is knight bd2. When they don't wanna simply lose the tension, you just play queen e7, you threaten e4. I always say, guys, if you wanna play against the King's Indian, you're not supposed to play with the knight on f3 and bishop on d3 because once we go and we break with e5, we're always going to be threatening e4, and then you just have to waste your precious time. And in this step-by-step video about the sidelines, now I just have to explain you some very, very important systems, side systems, with the knight f3. When they play knight f3, we just go g6 and time for a real things. In this video, we won't cover g3. G3 systems, we're just going to cover in the main lines because it is just going to transpose into the fianchetto system. But I decided to show you one very annoying system in this video. When they play g3, you play bishop g7, they go bishop g2, you play castles, castles d6, and they have a whole bunch of sidelines, including knight c3, rook e1, and knight bd2, where they just want to go with e4. Probably most logical thing is rook e1 to go with e4. You always treat these systems in the same fashion. How? You play knight bd7, and any e4, you gotta break and answer with e5. D takes e5 is never a good thing because you'll recapture by pawn in typical King's Indian way, play c6, and you got a nice position. If they ever, in this position, play a4, any a4, you play a5, and whether they play rook e1 with the idea e4, you go knight bd7, e4, e5. Whether they go knight c3, to go e4, you go knight bd7, e4, and you just break with e5. Another thing in this position is if, for example, they go knight c3. It doesn't change anything. They want to fight for e4. Now we're kind of playing some sort of Pierce defense, but then in that case, we play knight bd7, and any e4, we're just answering with e5. I already showed you at some point, if you remember, positions like this with the knight on e2. It's even better and easier for us with the knight on f3. After h3, we always oppose it with b6 because the only piece that we have undeveloped here, it's the light square bishop. We play b6, we want to play bishop b7 and solve the problems of the light square bishop. I like this setup. It's very flexible. It's very good. Any d takes e5, you go like this. Any d5, you just go a5 to secure the c5 square for the knight. And once you do it, you're going to bring your light square bishop back to c8 and try to move your knight from f6 probably. And usually it goes to e8. So you can break with f5. And at the same time, keep your light square bishop being open on c8. And finally, if your opponent goes for a very, very, very extremely annoying b3, I have two kinds of systems for you here. I have a one that I learned when I analyzed one game of Magnus Carlsen. I really enjoyed that one really, really a lot. And it gives me a great pleasure to present it to you here. It's the line with b3 where you play b5. It's a beautiful thing. It's line against c4. And it's a line where you just want to oppose the bishop on g2 with bishop b7. So when they go bishop b2, you go bishop b7. When they go knight bd2, you go knight bd7, and you want to break with c5. It's very interesting that a lots of 2600 guys, when you play b5, make a very typical mistake and go with knight e5. They just think, okay, this guy's a patzer, he's just weakened the light squares and his rook is hanging, they gotta play d5, and that's terrible because we would have our knight being placed forever in the center. No, guys, you take the knight. Wow, we've just won a piece and we've just lost a rook. Then we absolutely lock this rook up, and when they take, we don't touch anything. We just play knight d7, going after the pawn, going with the queen on c7, playing knight b6, and going after the bishop on a8. It's a fantastic game for black. Light square bishop is about to be taken. Any a4 you'll answer with b4. You can go deeper into these lines, but this line is already considered to be great for us. And that's why they gotta go with bishop b2. I already played a couple of very easy games with the black pieces, even against a couple of GMs. I'm talking about some serious games, not standard ones. In standard one, I played one and I won. I played two rapid games, one against GM I won, and another one I drew. And I played lots of blitz games where I had lots of really good results. When you play bishop b7, you simply don't allow your opponent to play any c4. Because any c4, you just capture, you go knight bd7, and if they ever play d5, you're just undermining the center with c6, and you want to afterwards go with the rook b8, or if needed, you want to take and play knight b6, going after both pawn on c4 and pawn on d5. And finally, if they go knight bd2, you go knight bd7, and when they go c4, you take. If they take by pawn, it's not a big problem. We just place the rook on the open file, threaten bishop f3 to win the piece. They gotta go queen c2, and here I like the plan. Flexible before anything else. I mean flexibility, e6. I wanna go e6, I don't wanna give you d5 after that, and I just wanna break with c5 this fashion. Another thing, if they go with knight c4. If they go knight c4, to go with the knight on a5, to go after the bishop, you just play beautiful Magnus Carlsen's plan. Just like I told you, I already used this plan so many times, and it worked fantastic for me in the practice. So what's the point about this one? After you go with a5, rook c1, first of all, with a5, you're kind of avoiding knight a5 by white. Second thing, you're preparing for minority attack with a4 at some point. A third thing is what you're about to see. Magnus broke in the center with c5, played knight cd7, not allowing him to take on c5 and break his pawns. And after a4, which happens in almost every single game of mine when I play a5, boom, rook a6, followed by queen a8, and the rook goes on c8, and this one goes on c6. A beautiful, very complicated, but at the same time, plan that should be enough for you to always get more than decent games with this type of games. I just want to briefly show you that after b3, according to my old analysis, you can play e5 here, breaking in the center, and when they take, exchanging the queens or not doesn't make any difference. You always have knight g4 and you're great, or if they immediately take without exchanging queens, knight g4 and you're just great. Another thing is, when they take and play bishop a3. For many decades, I can easily say the main rook was, of course, main move was rook e8 or queen d1 rook e8. And then Chigaev found e4, and I found him playing so many games with the system online. I tried it a couple of times and it works perfectly fine. You just go with e4, opening up your favorite piece. You second exchange, you have the bishop here, you have control of the dark squares, and I don't want to bother you now with these positions. It's just important to know that when they play knight d4, and that's the only move, you sack the pawn. They cannot take because you're just having knight g4 threatening here, opening up the bishop, going after the rook and threatening c5. While in the case of f4, you just go with knight c6, another amazing move. Knight c6, b takes c6. You now threaten, for example, moving the knight somewhere because the rook is hanging. Knight c3. You play bishop f5 because you want to play rook to d8. And I don't need to give you any other explanations here. Any h3, probably h5. You want to go with a rook d8. You want to play queen c5 if needed afterwards. Somehow that pawn on e3 has to be understood like a bone in their throat. And this position looks just amazing for us. And now, when we've seen all these possibilities against g3, and when we know that the main line with c4, I mean g3 and this one, when they play actually c4 in this game, well, all other side systems I just covered in this step-by-step side video, it's time to go on the new ones. I once again want to tell you, any knight c3, you go d5. You can find on my channel a couple of videos where I explain how to play when you play d5. Another thing is, what if they play knight bd2? That system deserves attention, and we gotta pay attention on this one. The point of knight bd2 is that they want to play e4, and if they do it, you will kind of play the Peart's defense. But you don't have to worry, because by now you could have learned that Peart's defense like this is pretty good for us and pretty cool. So when they play bishop d3, and that's not a best move, believe it or not, best move is bishop e5. I'll explain you why. And when they play bishop d3, you just go with castle. You just go knight c6 and break with e5. What's the point of this? You want to force your opponent to play d5, in which case the center is closed. Our knight is placed on the best attacking square. Right now, we're not even aware of the fact that knight on e7 is attacking piece. Why? Because the center is closed. One golden thing I've noticed about these guys who don't know much about the King's Indian, whether they're my students or not, they always should be happy when they break with f5, because probably they heard on so many videos about the King's Indian, go with f5. Well, it's not like that. You only go with f5 and go for the kingside action, in which case when the center is closed. And the center is closed when they play d5. You don't want to play f5 here when the center is not closed, where f5 would be a clear weakening of the light squares around the king. You only want to play in case they play d5. Now you want to move the knight. Now you want to play f5. That's first rule. Second rule, once you play f5 and they take, you always take by g-pawn. In 99% of cases, you take by g-pawn. Maybe 1% of cases you take by bishop or knight. But those are, I would say, a very rare exceptions. And finally, when you play e5 and they just take, it's very important to know not to take by pawn, because then you're going to be left with a kind of weak and absolutely useless knight on c6. So what do? Guys, you go with the knight e5, taking like this. So when they take, you recapture by pawn. Now you threaten the bishop. I already had one tournament game against international master Božić like this. It was a standard game in tournament a year ago. He played knight c4. I played knight h5. He played g3 to avoid any knight f4. I played queen e7. He played queen e2. And here I played rook d8. And soon after, we just drew the game. It's kind of boring system, and let's be honest, they don't have any advantage, but from another point of view, we don't have any advantage as well. I found one game of Big Ulf Andersson from Olympiad back to 1972, where his opponent went for rook d1, bishop e6. Played, you threaten now uh, you threaten now. Are you threatening in this case? No, you're not. So after they go with, for example, b4, getting some space on the queen side, you just go c6, exchanging everything, playing rook d8, and Ulf Andersson made the draw after mutual, maneuvering. Another thing in these positions is if they don't play bishop d3 but bishop b5. I promised you I'm going to explain you what to do and how to play against bishop b5. Well, when that happens, you just have to play c6. And now you're probably wondering, why would somebody give you c6? First of all, c6 doesn't give you any more knight c6. Second thing, one of the most classic approaches by black is breaking with e5. Guys, believe it or not, breaking with e5 would be a big mistake. Here we go with Gary's move c5, but let me just explain you what's so bad and what's so good by, what's so bad by black in going for e5, and what's so bad by, what's so good by white when they actually, when we go with knight bd7 and d5. The most classic approach here would be knight bd7. And if that's the case, they just can play, for example, one very cool, developing, nice, solid move. And you say, okay, I broke with e5, I'm good in the King's India. No, you're not. They play c3, you say, I don't see a point. Well, guys, in that case, they can easily get some space on the queen side by playing a4. They're not allowing you any b5. And whatever you do, for example, a5 or whatever, they will sooner or later get some sort of control of e5, d6, and this knight we gotta feel as such an annoying piece, and definitely white, thanks to the c4 square, thanks to the weakness of d6, because of c6, all of a sudden white is just better. And that's why when they play bishop e5, c6, bishop d3, castles, I'm suggesting you to play c5. That's how one of the best theoretical players in the world, Gary, created this system. When they take, it's not a big deal. You just go with knight c6, you just go with knight h5, threatening knight f4, opening up the bishop. Yes, it's kind of locked by this pretty strong pawns on c3 and b2, but we do threaten something. They have to go g3. In that case, we weaken some light squares. Position is with mutual chances. And I believe everyone is going to go with c3. You take on d4 and play knight c6. A very lovely position where you just want to go with a5. What's so special about a5? Well, some of these guys are very afraid of bishop g4, so they go h3. You go a5. What for? You stop expanding on the queen side by white. And second thing, if they ever play like this, you reposition the knight with tempo, attacking the bishop, and you want to reposition it via a6 to c5. Another thing is rook e1, you go knight d7. You're opening up the bishop, threaten the pawn on d4, and when they play d5, you just jump on e5, supported by the bishop on g7. After bishop f1, a4, threatening a3, going after the rook, enjoying like full activity of your pieces, and we just have to admit that black has a very lovely game. Another thing is instead of h3, they go rook e1. You once again play a5, and any d5 you play knight b4. When they bring the bishop back to here, you just break this pawn on e6 by playing e6, and that's all you need to know. Another thing is you play a5 because you always on a3 can put it back like this, and they never can take it because you would always take my knight. And your knight just naturally goes here. Well, in the case of this, you just capture by bishop. You want to bring the knight back into the center with knight c5 and want to break with d5. Another system here worth of considering, apart from g3, is knight c3, I just told you, is bishop g5 and knight bd2. Now we're left to check three main openings. So we're left to check bishop g5, which is Tory attack. Another thing is e3, which is kind of Kohler's system against the King's Indian system. And the third system is bishop f4 and its London system. Let's begin with bishop g5. It's called Tory attack. It's traditionally one of the most difficult systems to crack by white. It's extremely, I would say, hyper solid for white. They just developed this bishop. They don't want to give up for the knight just like that. It's more like a developing move where they'd like to develop their knight to d2, solidify their pawn structure with c3, which is going to mean that the bishop on g7 is probably going to forever be out of the play. And they just want to build up a pretty good game in the center with e4. You, of course, play bishop g7 and they go knight bd2. Here, let me just show you about these plans and what kind of ideas can you go for in this game. So, of course, the main move is going to be short castle, but I just want to show you a game between Garry Kasparov, who had black, and Nigel Short. Kasparov played once h6, played d6 to shut off the activity of the dark square bishop. You're not even probably realizing what's the point. And after c3, which is so typical in these positions, went for g5 and knight h5. Garry Kasparov in this game went on to win the dark square bishop, take it by knight, and afterwards with the bishop here to play a game like that. The thing about knight h5 is that after they go with any e3, you go knight d7, and you don't want to commit yourself with any knight c6. You want to be maximum flexible. So after bishop d3, e6, short castle, queen e7, a4, which somehow just gives them quite a nice and an active game on the queen side. Garry Kasparov played f5. Knight a1, he threatened his knight. Kasparov played knight f6, and after this captured and played short castle. I like black's game for a couple of reasons. First of all, he had a bishop here. He really had a flexible pawn structure, which basically means that when you play games like this, you just have a game full of interesting and rich with the possibilities. That's what I like about it. So I just wanted to show you this plan, even though my plan goes for short castle. And now they have two options: to play the main move c3 or to play early e4. Early e4 is bad without the pawn on c3. Why? Because you break with d5. Remember this move. And now, when they play e5, you just jump with the knight on e4, harassing this bishop. They can't go anything but to go with bishop e3. I played so many games like this. As soon as I jump with the knight on e4, game is almost over, because our next move is either we're gonna take the bishop, but for sure, if they save it, for example, bishop e3, we're gonna break on c5. It's nice position. They just try to keep it solid. You play queen b6, and somehow we don't have absolutely, like, I don't see a single problem for black. That's why they first, after knight bd2 castle, they play c3. You now play d6, and they now go e4. I also remember the game between Nigel Short and Vladimir Kramnik. Short tried to play hyper solid e3 system. Here, all of you who are familiar with the typical King's Indian ideas can say, guys, can we go with the knight bd7 and go with e5? Of course you can. Would it be a mistake? Of course it wouldn't be. Of course it would be just a normal line. Can I play something else? Of course you can play, but I especially wanted to give you the game of Kramnik, who came up with beautiful plan. He played queen e8, and queen e8 is one of those typical ideas in the King's Indian, where you unpin your queen even before you committed yourself with e5. But we all know that you did queen e8 just to be able to push your pawn to e5. Once you push your pawn to e5, it will mean that they will never be able to play bishop d3, because once we play e5, we're going to be threatening e4. So when they play bishop e2, e5, and now all of you will say, okay, Maya, this is not a problem. If they capture an e5, then you just have a good game. You just develop your bishop, knight, rook d8, kick that bishop away with h6, and everything's cool. But what if they just sit and wait? Well, that's exactly what happened in this game. And here, I simply fell in love with the following plan for black, because so many games and so many times when you play your King's Indian, you're going to have a similar type of games. And it's always good to be familiar with these kinds of ideas and to say, aha, I wasn't familiar with this one. He played h6, just provoking him to take, in which case, of course, he played bishop h4. But I'm just saying, in case he takes, you would take, bring the bishop back to g7 and break with f5, and you just can probably launch the pawn storm with a bishop here. Black would be just better. That's why bishop h4. And when bishop h4 happens, now you have this beautiful plan that I wasn't familiar with till I saw this game. Kramnik in the game played bishop f5. And I said, that's what he wants to do. So he wants to avoid any queen c2. He wants to take full control of this diagonal. But on top of all that, he wants to do something else. When Nigel Short played a4, knight c6, a5, Kramnik played now a very lovely plan. And you know why this is so important? Because in just a few minutes, I'm just going to explain you what's the plan that I chose for you against London system. Literally everyone plays nowadays London. Actually I went to a couple of tournaments here in Serbia, blitz tournaments. Everyone plays London. I went to a couple of rapid tournaments to practice for the Chess Bra World and Blitz Championship. Everyone, literally everyone in Serbia playing rapid chess London. So you gotta be ready for the London. Also, I know that London is easily the third most common thing against my King's Indian. So you definitely have to be ready. So what's so special about it? Boom, e4, locking up the center, and in a way locking up the king side, which means that you will have to know what to do after knight e1. This guy just wants to go like, for example, c4, knight c2, knight a3, knight b5, where after he plays the bishop here, or maybe c5, he's going to be able to go after these two pawns. But it takes so much time. And just because of that, we play g5, kicking the bishop away, repositioning our knight to e7, and now you're wondering, what if they play a6, b6, knight c2? Bishop g6, very lovely move, knight b4, c5. I would say that's the mastership of these top GMs. They know when and what to do in terms of defending themselves properly. For example, most of us would just go with the kingside action, but they do care, and right now I'm talking about one of the best players in the history of this game, Vlad Kramnik, who played c5. This guy played knight c2. Vlad went for knight f5, defending on d6 and going after the bishop. Played rook d8, defended, I don't know, he's just controlling and overprotecting a7 once knight b5 happens, and boom, h5. He had a very lovely position of his minor pieces on the king side. He simply put all his pieces onto the king side, and of course, Nigel Short got demolished in this game. Take a look at this one. It's a very lovely game. It's a very, very nice setup for black, and it's going to remind you of many other similar positions that we're going to see a little bit later. So after d6, the best move is e4, and for some reason, whenever I show this position to my son, and I did show it to him like a couple of times, not couple of times, dozens of times, because my dad or his grandfather is playing this variation with white. He all the time plays knight b7 and d5. Do you know what's this? I would say it's learning stereotypically what to do and how to treat these systems. And let's immediately clarify one thing. That's way better than learning one line by heart, because he's actually doing something on certain, like understanding, and he just knows the pattern of developing these pieces, and he just remembers the plans. That's way more important than the concrete lines. But definitely the best move is c5, definitely. And they have two ways. For example, d takes c5, but recently I faced an IM who constantly keep playing d5 against me. I also remember playing against European and Serbian champion Injic, one blitz game, where I had a great position. Eventually I lost in Dejan Joveljic's tournament, the one that he organized like 2 years ago. It was a fantastic tournament. And Injic played d5. You're just breaking with e6. That's what I did. He captured and played bishop c4. I knew about this one, so I played rook e8. I'm threatening to take on c4 and to take on e4. Injic played castle, and here I forgot the line, to be honest. I didn't play the best move. That's what Nepo did against Danielian in his speedchess.com Blitz Championship back to 2019. He played knight bd7 and won a couple of games in the same fashion. I didn't know about, and I didn't understand how important was that knight flexibility in that position. Nowadays I understand what's the point about it. And what's the thing here? I played knight c6, which was a little bit suspicious. Injic afterwards didn't take advantage in the most precise way. It was equal position, but eventually I cracked and lost. The best move is knight bd7. So you keep your knights in a maximum flexibility. Danielian played rook e1. You don't want to take on c4 and maybe to at some point consider taking here. Or maybe just move the queen to c7 and play that. So after rook e1, queen c7. Here, Danielian played queen c2. And Nepo didn't rush. He played h6, took on c4, and kicked the knight away. And now take a look at this. Anytime, that's exactly what I did wrong. When I did something similar in my game, Injic captured on f6, and then I couldn't capture by bishop because of knight e3, knight d5. And he would have a permanently strong knight on d5. So on bishop f6, I played some b takes c4, and after bishop g7, king g7, it's a little bit better game for white. But in this game, he can easily go for that, because after this, boom, that's the point. You can capture by knight, and you can keep controlling d5 square with the knight. And after knight d6, queen d6, e5, queen c6, now we have a nice bishop, a little bit better than this knight because the game is open, pawns are on both sides, and you always can break with b4 and kind of create weakness either on c3 or b2. Very lovely one. One of the main moves and main lines is e4, c5, d takes, and bishop c4. In a famous game between Yusupov and Garry Kasparov, I remember that Yusupov played bishop e2. Main move is bishop c4. By far, absolutely the most common here. But if bishop e2, you just go knight c6. And when they go castles, you go queen c7. You always go with a knight c6 and queen c7. Point of Kasparov's game is that Kasparov here developed his rook to d8. When I was preparing this for you, I knew most of the lines that I was preparing for you, except this one. I forgot about Kasparov's approach with rook on d8. Rook on d8 is nicely controlling the d file, taking a pretty good control of the game like this. And he's just waiting for white to play some rook d1, in which case exchanging like pair of the rooks certainly would be a little bit more pleasant for black than white. Rook f2 e1, h6 always, and when they threaten to play g3 followed by e5, you always play knight h5. Guys, I've seen so many games with g5 here. Don't do it, because then you will have problems with f5 square. Second thing, don't ever do. I once asked one of my students, what would you play? The guy said e5. I wanted to kill him. How can you suggest e5? What's wrong with you? Why not e5? Because the bishop is going to take on f6. He's going to reroute that knight with c4 to e3 and jump on d5. Any times we play bishop e6, they will first exchange the light square bishops, bishop c4, and then go knight c3, knight c4, knight e3, knight e5. So that's why rook d8, rook f2 e1, h6, knight h5. Yusupov went for knight c4, bishop e6, and played like this. Kasparov played knight f4 and eventually won the game in Tal Memorial back to 1995. But I like one correspondence game where the guy just decided to improve his game a little bit over Kasparov's game. He didn't play knight f4. He played rook d7, and if you ask me, that's absolutely the most logical move. You're just doubling your rooks on the open file. a3, queen b6, threatening bishop to b3. And after like bishop to b3, the guy went rook d7, knight e2, knight f4, queen f1, da-da-da-da. You just play queen d8. Placing your queen behind the rook is one of the crucial things to say that you're better in this type of middle game. The guy went knight b3, he even played b6, kind of restricting the activity of this knight. Queen behind the rook. Definitely black was better, and eventually he managed to win the game. And finally, what's so special about the bishop c4 move? Well, on bishop c4 you play knight c6, they go queen e2, you go queen c7, they just go with short castle. And this is the point. This is where you have to learn something. You cannot even imagine. My father is absolutely the best player with the white pieces I know about this system. And he literally defeated so many strong GMs, IMs, like 40, 50, 60 years ago, because he's almost 90. And I really haven't met a guy who would play this system the way he does. But I know every single detail about this variation with white and black. And when I play against younger kids, I like to play this with white pieces because kids don't know to play patiently, and they also don't know how to, simply like shuffle their pieces around and maneuver all the way, like around. And I also know this for black, and I also have good results with black because I know what am I supposed to do. I played a rapid tournament here in Serbia 2 years ago. I was 6 out of 6. Another Indian IM was 6 out of 6. He was lower rated than me. I was paired to play with the black pieces. He went for this opening. And even though I checked this variation probably zillions of times, whether I was black and even played those games, whether I was black or white, I made a typical mistake. You gotta play knight a5. You gotta play knight a5 first, and that's so important in this position, and that's what Magnus did, and that's how he kind of refuted the system. The point is, I played h6, and you can find in database like a whole bunch of games played by Le Tuan Minh. I believe he's from Vietnam, GM, who's specialized for these blitz games on chess.com and Lead Chess. And he probably, you're just going to find his games, Le Tuan, and all the time his names, and he won all the games in the same fashion. He takes on f6, and after bishop f6, queen e3. If by now, if he hasn't won more than 30 games like this, then kill me. I would actually 30 games you have in the database. Probably you would find more than hundreds of games like this, and you just win a pawn. And that's what my father played against me like 30 years ago when I just started to play chess, and I was familiar with this trick. And even though I was familiar, I played against h6, and the guy, when captured, I said, oh my goodness, I played this, and this is bad, because when you play e takes f6, they just go knight h4, threaten to take on g6. I played some knight e7, and the guy played f4 with f5. And he outplayed me. He outplayed me because I had problems with the space. So that's why instead of h6, we first gotta go knight a5, and it's very important theoretical idea. And when they play bishop d3, now you play bishop h6, h6, bishop h4, you play like this. And when you of course threaten knight f4, at the same time avoiding bishop g3 because you're gonna take it. They go queen e3. You now go first c4, and c4 is going all together with e5. And now you're just taking even these squares. With c4, you're just getting space with the b5, knight b7, knight c5. And after rook f to d1, bishop e6, placing and opening up the back rank. And after this, playing b5. And this is how Magnus played one of his games. or maybe Magnus was white and he got outplayed, but eventually he managed to win against Shamoev, something like that. I can't remember. I just know that this is a beautiful system, repositioning your knight via b7 to c5. At some point, when needed, you're just going to get rid of this bishop. Are you going to do it by bringing your knight on f4? That actually depends. But in general, this is just a nice position, and black is in the driver's seat. So now you know how you're supposed to play against Tory's system. We're left two more side systems, and let's go with e3. A system that happens very often lately against me when I use the King's Indian systems, of course, bishop g7. And I would just like to make one general conclusion. Those who play this system, they should be playing with the bishop on e2. I'm just going to tell you and to give you like a piece of general advice. Whoever plays bishop d3 with the knight on f3, he's making mistake, because we always go castle, we always go d6, we always go knight b7, and once we go and break with e5, you remember that idea by Kramnik with queen e8 and e4. Well, that's what we're gonna do here, and that's why having the bishop on d3 and knight on f3 is always bad, because sooner or later we're just going to take that tempo, or maybe queen e7 followed by rook e8, depends, and they will have to move either knight from f3 or bishop from d3. And that's why majority of these guys play c4. So after castle, knight c3, d6. Once again, I don't want to explain anymore. Bishop d3 is just bad because at certain moment we're going to have rook e8, queen e7, and push e4, and they will have to move the bishop. And that's why good players, these type of systems, play with bishop e2. You go knight b7, castles e5. That's it. That's the most important game here, but most important position here. And this is something I want to analyze with you. On your level, I'm talking about medium level guys from, I don't know, 16, 1700 to 2100. Most of these games will go with d takes e5. That's very interesting. Those who are familiar with plans by white, they will go with b3 or b4. But before we go there, let me just explain how do you play d takes e5. You of course play always like this. A golden rule of these positions is if you ever play e4 and kick the knight away, they won't have a knight around the king, and you're going to be able to attack afterwards. How? By bringing the queen to e7, by bringing the knight to e5, by simply generally generating all your pieces onto the king's side, moving them there, and preparing for the attack. I'm just going to show you one game of Nakamura. His opponent played in blitz b3. Nakamura instantly played e4 because he was familiar with the fact that playing e4 and opening up the strongest and the weakest piece in the King's Indian, that's the bishop g7, was of great, value. So after knight d2, he just improved it with, for example, rook e8. And when the guy played bishop e2, he just played knight c5. Just like you see, he was ready to jump on d3, and that's how, after queen c2, he played like bishop f5, went with the knight d3, queen e7, rook a d8, and black had an amazing game. Remember, guys, once they let you go with e4, something is wrong with their position. And that's why those who take on e5, they will always go with e4. And this was especially typical for the games played like 50 or 60 years ago. For some reason, this was popular. And here, all you have to understand is that you have to play on the dark squares. So what's one of the most necessary moves in these kinds of positions? It's c6. c6 is a beautiful, flexible move, not allowing them to jump with the knight either on d5 or b5. And whether they play, I don't know, h3, bishop g5, queen c2, b3, whatever, you just want to take control of the dark squares. They usually go queen c2 to be able to go with a rook d1. And this is where you have to know what to do. You go always with a rook e8. The rook e8 makes perfect sense. Overprotecting e5, moving from the diagonal because sometimes they can play b3, bishop a3. And when they play rook d1, you always can go with the queen on e7. Having the queen on e7 is of great value for you. Why? They can never play bishop e3 because of knight g4. They can never play h3 to play bishop e3 because in that case you can play knight h5. And now you see the point of c6. They can jump and harass our queen. And our knight goes on f4. And our knight can go on c5 and can go back to f8 and can go to e6 in both of these cases, controlling both c5 and f4. Also, you want to secure the position of the knight by playing a5. Those are the rules of maneuvering in these games. I can now show you like a whole bunch of games by Gligorich, Najdorf, and some other Fischer, and some other top guys, classics I'd say, and you would understand it, but you don't need it. You don't need it. You can actually find it, of course, in these step-by-step videos. My task is just to give you like the main ideas and understanding of the lines, so you can just go search and look at deeper. And finally, in case they don't do this, but for example, they just go with move like b4. Guys, King's Indian defense, that's the topic of this lecture. And I just want to tell you one thing. King's Indian attack. Have you ever heard of that expression? Well, you probably saw so many e4 games, and now I'm going to flip up the board, where against Sicilians, they play knight f3, e6, they go, for example, d3, and when you play knight c6, g3, and when you play d5, knight bd2, and when they play knight f6, bishop g2, bishop e7, castles, castles, and you do e5, rook e1, and then the knight comes to f1, h2, h4, it goes g4, pawn goes like this, dark square bishop goes on f4. Or you probably saw some games of Robert James Fischer with the white pieces playing against French, where he played d3, d5, knight d2, knight f6, knight g on f3, c5, g3, knight c6, bishop g2, bishop e7, castles, castles, and we have nothing else but absolutely the same type of the games where you play rook e1, defending the pawn, opening up the square f1 for the knight, playing h4 to reroute that knight via h2 to g4, and launch the kingside action afterwards. It's called King's Indian attack. So what does it have in common with the previously seen position? A lot. Because when they play e3, I call this kind of Coley system against the King's Indian. You play bishop g7, c4 castles, knight c3, d6, bishop e2, knight bd7. You don't need to be Magnus Carlsen to come up with all these moves. And that's another good thing about the King's Indian. You can easily know like first 6, 7, 8, even 10 moves of the theory without much thinking. And you also know your plans, and they are usually connected with some attacks. So when they go with b4, you just go with e4. Boom. That's the point. We're locking the game. We're locking the game. And why is that so important? Because now, when the center is locked, first of all, they go after the pawn. We got to defend it by the rook. Rook defends the pawn. Also, opens up the f8 square for the knight, goes on h7, and goes eventually on g5. So let me show you a very nice game that only lasted like 22 moves, where black absolutely destroyed white in a very typical fashion. So by this game, you're just going to see the King's Indian attack in its real sense. You're just about to learn one of the most important and most typical plans in the King's Indian, and it's called King's Indian attack. And finally, let's enjoy some tactics. The guy played knight f8, played h5, played knight h7, and with all these moves, I kind of went a little bit faster because you should be familiar with this. a6, b takes, b takes, and knight g5. Everything's cool. e4 is overprotected. Queen c2, and this is the moment where I usually say, reminds me of Kramnik's game. When I play my blitz and bullet games, I always play bishop f5, or I always go h4 and h3. These guys play a little bit better because they play on both sides of the board. So c5 has the idea of breaking the pawns in the center, opening the bishop on g7, and at the same time preparing even more, I would say, efficient attack. So d takes, the guy went for knight b3, knight g4. He's now just threatening. They're so dangerous. And you can't play knight c5 because queen d6 would either threaten the mate or win this knight. So bishop a3, going after the pawn on c5, and boom, knight f3. For example, you can't take by pawn because f3 takes f3, bishop f3, queen h4 is threatening mate, queen g4 check, queen f3 check, and bishop h3 would be checkmate. Everything was forcing, and it's so nice. So that's why the guy after knight f3 played bishop f3 takes, played g3, and black didn't wait. He didn't hesitate. He immediately went for the knight h2. And the whole game just shows like a King's Indian attack in its true, a sense. So after king h2, you have a beautiful queen d7 using the battery and winning this game just like that. And another thing is rook after d1, played queen g5, and if queen h2, once again the same thing, and after knight c5, played h4. What a powerful win and display of black strength and his active pieces in the King's Indian attack. That's how he won the game, and I always enjoy to show this game to my students because one good model game, and you can just easily understand and remember what are you supposed to do against the opening for the rest of your life. If you learn by heart, you're going to remember for 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, but eventually it's going to evaporate. If you learn the plan, it's going to deeply sink in. And finally, London system. Speaking of the side systems against d4, knight f6, and King's Indian, the last one that I want to finish with is going to be the London. So bishop f4, bishop g7, and by the way, I don't want to mention, any moment, any time they go with knight c3, guys, we got to go with d5 because we don't want to let them go with e4. If you want to find more about this, go on my channel. You have in total 450 videos on my channel, and you're going to be able to find how to treat this type of position. Classic London players, they go with e3, castles, h3, d6, and we just go with the system that I explained you in one of my videos, but now I'm improving over that video. First of all, I have to tell you something. One of the biggest London experts in the world is my good friend. His name is Nicola Sedla, Grandmaster from my country. X2600 player, wrote 2 books about the London from White's angle. And then one day I just called him and asked him, could you give me something interesting or suggest me something interesting for black? He said, do you want something attacking or something positional? I said, give me something attacking where I can play a good game. And he said, Maya, in that case, you gotta go with knight after d7. That's absolutely the most beautiful plan. You're just bringing it back to d7 so you can break eventually with e5. And that's one of the points of the London system. They don't want to let us go with e5. Thanks so much, and thanks to him, I solved the problem of the London system forever. Not a while ago, like 2 weeks ago, one of my students asked me, Maya, everybody keeps playing bishop c4 against me here. And you know what? Probably somebody came up with some course or some suggestion or maybe made some video, and everybody in the London plays this. It's basically aimed against our plan. I usually criticize my students who still do knight after d7 because when they do it, they can go with h4 and to launch the attack with h5. Now you're a little bit too late with your attack. They did not even commit themselves with a castle, and there is no point of going back but actually going full weight to attack. Now you can't play anything but the queen e8. And you know what? I mean, h5 just gives them like a very, very promising attacking chances. Also notice that Grandmaster Dusan Popovic played in one of Title Tuesdays against Magnus, and Magnus played something similar with the white pieces. So what's the point? And what's the secret about bishop c4? Secret is that they want to go with h4, h5 if you play knight after d7. Basically that it's aimed against knight after d7. And that also shows us that they hate knight after d7 and they don't want to be under the attack. So what are we supposed to do? Play c5. That's the key moment here. You're opening up the queen to go on b6. After like c3, queen b6, going after the b2, queen b3, knight c6. And after this, you just go queen here, so you can play knight f5 and win the bishop pair. Ever since I learned this plan, I never lost any of my games. It's so nice and so easy, and I'm just revealing it to you. Hopefully you're going to enjoy this one. And finally, let's just go into the main London system with bishop e2, and you go with my absolutely most favorite line against London. It's knight f to d7. It's a beautiful move, and in comparison to one of the videos that I published here on my channel where I suggested knight f to d7, castle z5, knight c6, c4, f5, knight c3. In that video, I suggested g5 or king h8. Now I'm suggesting something completely different. I'm giving you a line with e4. So in comparison to that video, that is really okay. I can't say any more like top-notch variation or really that good, but it's okay, definitely. This e4 is, in my opinion, a killer of the London system. Ever since I launched this type of action, and I'm about to show you the plan, I won all my games. I'm gonna show you just two brief model games to learn what to do and how to play. After knight e2, everything depends on the following plan. You bring the knight back to f6, and you want to play knight e7, g5, knight g6. When you learn this part of the thing, you already know like 50% of the not 50, 75% of the plan in these games. So they go rook b1 to go b4. You go g5. They go a3 to go b4. You go g5. They go rook c1 to go a3, b4, c5. You go knight e7 and g5. And let me just show you a model game with rook b1. The guy obviously wanted to go with b4. Black played g5, preparing himself for knight e7, knight g6. Once you bring the knight to g6, you want to lock the dark square bishop and shut it off with f4. But before you play f4, you gotta first overprotect the pawn on e4. So look at this: b4, knight e7, any c5. You're not supposed to let them take and go knight c4. Then you're gonna be dead because the London bishop is gonna do its job on this diagonal, and the d6 is really gonna be weak. You gotta play d5. By playing d5, now you overprotected e4, which means that you really want to threaten knight g6 and f4. The guy played knight b5, and I probably played 10 games like this so far, maybe even more. Knight e8, bishop h5. They want to take the knight away and weaken the c7. Knight g6, they go a4, kicking the knight away, bringing the knight away to get the light square bishop. If you win the light square bishop, they're absolutely clueless, and they don't know how to attack and what to do. So they have to bring it back. And now, since e4 is defended by the pawn on d5, and knight is on g6 supporting f4, that's what we have to do. When they play queen b3, they want to take on e4 because the king is pinned. King h8 in safety. You can use the g file afterwards. c6, hyper solid. This is exactly how I played in European Rapid Championship against one German guy, and I won. Absolutely the same plan. g4, g takes h3, knight h5, and now just like a black strong and these like mean clouds that are just generating over your city sometimes when it's about to be rainy and to be extremely lightning. That's how we slowly but surely kick their pieces away and preparing the attack. So queen h4, queen h5, b takes, queen b6, bishop h3, rook f5, rook g5, threatening mate, and after rook g2, he put all his hopes into this move, but after bishop e5, we call this covering, disconnecting the queen and the defense of the bishop, and winning the game. It's a fantastic game. It's a game that happened in amateur team championship of United States in 2006 between two pretty, I would say, medium level players, but It's absolutely, absolutely nice when you find those kinds of things. And finally, let me just show you one modern game of one of the best London games, London players ever. It's Gatakamsky. He was white against fantastic Fedosev. Kamsky played c5. He wants to open up the bishop at all costs. Fedosev played e5, played g5, and Fedosev didn't want to go knight e7, knight g6, and f4. Of course, he could have done that. He immediately went with g4. Kamsky played b5, played bishop e5, finding a place for his pieces. G takes, g takes. Fedosev chased away his bishop, took, and played knight e4. After he went for the d5 pawn, he took on e5, played c6, played queen e7, and he was about to win the pawn on e5 after he put the king in safety, and simply Kamsky collapsed and lost the game afterwards. Guys, hopefully you enjoyed in these model games, but more importantly, in a line, overall line suggestions that I gave you about the King's Indian, and hope this is going to be your long-term opening repertoire with the black pieces against the sidelines of the King's Indian. Wait for the step-by-step main lines. It's gonna be out in just a couple of weeks from now. All the best and see you soon.